My sister Christina and I are just a year apart in age. We started seeing more of each other after our children were born, but then something changed. Christina doted on her son, Justin, and eventually abandoned her daughter, Heather. "Here's a failure," she said. We decided to take Heather in, but calling her a failure was outrageous. Christina would regret giving up her own child. I'm Ryan, 37 years old. I've loved books since I was a kid. I wanted to work with books, so after college, I joined a publishing company. Eventually, I married Brittany, who is 4 years younger than me. And we were blessed with 3 children. When our third child was born, Brittany quit her job to focus on housework and childcare. My work kept me busy, so I couldn't help much with housework and childcare, but Brittany, having worked in the same field, understood my job and managed everything so well on her own. So, I made sure to spend time with our kids on my days off. I have a sister who's a year younger than me. Her name is Christina. Despite our close ages, our personalities didn't match, so we didn't interact much. We started visiting each other's homes after my first child was born. When our son Kevin was born, Christina's son Justin was already in elementary school, but Justin and his sister Heather adored Kevin. Later, we had 2 more children, and we continued our family interactions so the cousins could bond. I began to feel something was off when Justin turned 12 and Heather turned 11. Christina started bringing only Heather to our house. Justin was busy with tutoring and extracurricular activities, she said. Christina often left Heather with us, saying she had to pick up Justin. "Isn't Heather taking any classes?" I asked once. Heather replied, "I'm not good at anything, so they don't want to spend money on me." "What do you mean?" "Justin is promising, so they invest in him now." "Isn't there something you want to do, Heather?" "I wanted to join an art class, but they said it wouldn't help me get into a good school, so it's not allowed." It wasn't just that, I noticed other disparities. Justin always wore new, expensive clothes, while Heather wore old hand-me-downs. One time, our families went out to eat together. Justin could order whatever he wanted, including drinks and desserts, but Heather was only allowed to choose from the cheaper lunch menu. "Christina, that's not fair to Heather," I said. Christina laughed and said, "Justin is brilliant. We want him to go to a good school and become a doctor or lawyer. That way, our retirement is secure. So, we invest in Justin now. Heather's grades aren't great, so spending money on her is a waste. We've given up on her. We can't afford to spend on a child with no future prospects. Unless you want to cover our meals, Ryan? I'll cover Heather's." "You're stingy." Who was really being stingy, unable to spend equally on both children? Christina's behavior escalated. Just having her at home costs money. So, she left Heather with us more often. Heather didn't complain and stayed quiet. She must have understood she was left behind because of the cost. She barely ate, even when we served meals. I felt so sorry for Heather. One night, when Christina and her husband Brandon came to pick Heather up, I confronted them. "What were you doing so late? Pay more attention to Heather." "We can't help it. Justin's tutoring runs late. Today, we took him out to celebrate his perfect test score," Christina said without a hint of guilt. I lost my temper and yelled, "Justin and Heather are both your kids." I heard a child crying from the bedroom. "Kids are for our future security. We don't need one who can't earn money." "Right, Brandon?" Christina sought Brandon's agreement. They must have discussed Heather's fate beforehand. What to do with Heather? Brandon just nodded without any surprise. "If you feel that way, why don't you take Heather, Ryan?" "What? Make Heather one of your kids. What? You already have 3, one more won't matter. What are you saying? Take this failure. With those parting words, Christina left with Brandon. As I was about to chase after them, I felt a tug on my shirt. Heather, who was supposed to be sleeping with the kids, was standing there. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she said just one word. It hurts. As she spoke, the tears she had been holding back flowed freely. I hugged Heather, unable to do anything else. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Heather. Then Brittany, holding one of our still awake children, came over and said, Do you want to be our child? I looked at Brittany's face. Are you sure? If Heather's okay with it, I welcome her. The kids adore Heather like their real sister. Heather started crying loudly. That was her answer. For a while, I thought Christina might come to take Heather back, but she never did. When I contacted her, she insisted. As long as we have Justin, that's enough. She showed no concern for Heather. Brittany and I decided to start the adoption process, knowing Heather wouldn't be happy going back to that house. At first, Heather cried all the time, but gradually she became a great big sister to our kids. Especially our youngest, who still needed constant attention. When Brittany was busy with housework, Heather would watch over the little one, and Brittany seemed grateful for it. Most of all, Heather was great at drawing. She could draw family portraits and anime characters perfectly. Whenever Heather started drawing, the kids would gather around quietly to watch. They'd request what they wanted her to draw next. Heather was also good at storytelling, creating stories for the characters she drew. The kids would listen with shining eyes. Heather, you're so good at drawing and telling stories. You're the only one who can calm these rowdy kids. When I said that, Heather smiled shyly. I'm not smart, so this is all I can do. It's a wonderful talent. Not everyone can do it. Even if she wasn't academically gifted like Justin, Heather had many great qualities. Heather was the star of our household. Christina never realized or even tried to see that. She gave Heather up. On Father's Day the following year, after finalizing the adoption, Heather officially became our daughter. That day, the kids gave me a present. A paper plate with a crayon drawing of me on it. The plate had holes punched in it with a ribbon threaded through, so it could be hung on the wall. You drew this well. Heather taught you, right? When I said that, Kevin, who had just started elementary school, smiled happily. Then, Ryan. Heather had called me that way since she was little. Even on this day, now that we were family, she still called me like that. But maybe she thought of me as Dad. This is a Father's Day present. What she handed me was a neatly wrapped, ribbon-tied gift. What? You're giving this to me? Yes. When I opened the package, a mug came out. It must have been just a plain white mug originally, but it was decorated with illustrations, probably done with special pens. It said thank you, Dad, along with the drawings. Heather. Was it really okay for me to receive this? Maybe she had wanted to give it to her real dad. Heather, is this okay? I made it for you, Ryan. Thank you. I'll treasure it. I vowed to myself to make Heather happy. After that, our interactions with Christina's family ceased. We had maintained the relationship for the cousins' sake, but now Heather was with us. Justin must be busy and doesn't have time to bother with us. Christina, focused on Justin, never reached out. Only once did she call when Justin got into the best high school in the area. How about it, Ryan? Isn't Justin amazing? All that expensive tutoring paid off. That's great. Congratulations. I should send a gift to celebrate. No need. We only have one child, but you have 4. It wouldn't be fair for us to receive just 1 gift while we have to send 4 for your kids. So, no thanks. Besides, I doubt Heather will get into a good school. She might as well start working. Or maybe she can babysit your kids at your place. Don't joke. Heather is our child now. We'll make sure she at least finishes high school. If she wants to go to a good school, we'll support her. The kids are like siblings now. Heather is a great big sister. Don't ever call her a babysitter again. Oh, scary. Do as you like. I wonder if you can afford to send 4 kids to school on your salary. Even though I said we wouldn't let the kids feel uncomfortable, life was tough. Could we really raise and send 4 kids to school? Owning a home seemed like a distant dream. Brittany sighed as she looked at the budget. Brittany, is it tight again this month? I'm sorry. It's okay. When the kids get a little older, I'll look for a job. Brittany always said that. Justin passed his exams. That's good. But is it really what Justin wants? Justin had worked hard to meet his parents' expectations, but things didn't go smoothly after that. In reality, he struggled with college entrance exams. When he couldn't get into the university Christina and Brandon had chosen, he became withdrawn. I never thought Justin would fail, Christina said when she called for the first time in a long while. I remembered when Christina left Heather behind. She called Heather a failure back then too. What do you mean by failure? Is it only a failure if he doesn't become a doctor or lawyer? Justin must have had things he wanted to do, but you pushed your expectations on him. Do you blame Justin if things don't go as planned? Have you ever listened to what Justin or Heather wanted? Kids aren't born for their parents. They have their own lives to live. Parents should help them with that. You're so high and mighty. It's easy for you with 3 kids, now 4. Maybe one of them will become rich. My hard work will be wasted if Justin doesn't succeed. He has to try again next year. It was Justin, not you, who worked hard. That's not true. I worked hard to make sure Justin could succeed. But Justin, having lost his motivation, didn't attempt the entrance exams the following year. He didn't go to college, didn't work, and just stayed in his room every day. No matter how much Christina tried to console him, Justin's heart didn't budge. Eventually, Christina started taking her frustration out on Justin and Brandon. Fights became frequent in Christina's house, and Brandon eventually left. Christina moved to a small apartment with Justin. Their savings were gone, and she started working to support the 2 of them. 10 years after we took Heather in, on Father's Day. This day also marked the anniversary of Heather becoming part of our family. Every year on Father's Day, Heather made a handmade gift for me. But this year, the gift wasn't handmade. Ryan, here's this year's present. What she handed me was a paperback book. The cover featured Heather's familiar character drawings and her name. I jumped up and hugged Heather, shouting with joy. You did it, Heather! How do you like my present? It's the best. I'm so proud of you. Thanks to you and Brittany. Heather had been drawing comics as well as illustrations. I always knew Heather had a talent for art, and over the years, her skills had visibly improved. Her stories were engaging too. So Brittany and I reached out to every editor we knew in the comic industry. We wanted them to see Heather's work. Finally, someone recognized her talent, and Heather made her debut in a comic magazine. After graduating high school, Heather attended a vocational school but started her career as a comic artist while still in school. After a few one-shots, she secured a serial publication. And now, her first comic book had been published. Despite Christina and Brandon calling her a failure, Heather's success didn't stop. Her comics became popular, got adapted into an anime, and even had a movie deal in the works. By then, Heather had her own apartment nearby, but she still visited us when she could. Then, something happened. After a long period of no contact, Christina showed up. I could guess why she came now.
Heather, you're amazing. I never knew you had such talent.
First, she showered Heather with praise. Had she ever praised Heather like this when she was her mom? How did Heather feel about being praised like this? She must have felt happy. There was a possibility she might prefer her biological parents. If I had known Heather would be this successful, I would never have let her go. With Heather earning money, Justin's failure can be easily rectified. Right, Ryan? Christina looked at me and said, "Can you give Heather back?" What? I gave birth to Heather. Of course, it's better for her to be with her real parents. What are you saying? You abandoned her. I was busy with Justin at that time. I didn't have time for Heather. And now Heather has moved out and is living on her own. But she will repay us, won't she? After all, we are her real parents. I was at a loss for words. I wondered if I could compete with her real parents. If Heather chose Christina, there was nothing I could do. But Heather was calm. You never praised my drawings. I've been drawing since I was in elementary school, but I was scolded for drawing at home. So I drew in secret. Really? I don't remember. But no one got angry at Ryan's house. On the contrary, they always praised me. Everyone enjoyed my comics. So I was happy and wanted to improve, to draw comics that everyone would enjoy. I got better because I stayed at Ryan's house. If I had stayed at home, my potential would have been crushed. What? I would have remained just a failure. You called me a failure, didn't you? You told Ryan you were giving him a failure. No, I didn't. I remember clearly. I was discarded because I was no longer needed. By my real mom. No, I didn't abandon you. I was just busy with Justin, so I had Ryan take care of you. Christina. Heather called her by her name. I am no longer your child. I won't repay you. What? I will repay Ryan and Brittany. What about me and Justin? We are no longer family, so I don't care. I'm your real mom. You may have given birth to me, but Ryan and Brittany loved me. They allowed me to live for myself, not for my parents. That's why I could achieve my dreams. I won't be a convenient tool for your old age. Christina just stood there, mouth agape. After that, Justin found a job far away and moved out. Justin finally started living his own life. Christina, who tried to control her children's lives for her own sake, ended up with nothing. The following Father's Day, we moved into our long-awaited house. It was a Father's Day gift from Heather. Heather said she bought the house so the whole family could live together. We moved from our cramped apartment for 6 to a spacious house. Heather rented a separate workspace, but said she would spend time at this house whenever she could. As if that wasn't already a dream come true, Heather called us Dad and Mom. For the first time. Dad, Mom, thank you. Thank you for making me part of the family. We should be thanking you, Heather. Thank you for becoming part of our family. Wait a minute! You stupid wife! Remember this! Of course, I have no intention of remembering. Behind me, a noisy woman is clutching her stomach and desperately shouting at me, but I don't care. Besides, this is the first time I've run this hard since becoming an adult. Come to think of it, I was pretty fast on my feet during my school days. That thought crossed my mind. I'm out of breath and it's hard, but strangely, I feel exhilarated. I'm free from now on. My name is Lisa. I'm a 35-year-old office worker. I work in the administrative department of a major corporation. It's not that I have high expectations, but before I knew it, I was not just in my 30s but almost in my 40s. It's not that I don't want to get married, but as my years of service have increased, thankfully so has my salary, and I can live alone if necessary. However, there are times when I feel lonely. It seems like it's time to seriously consider getting a cat. While lost in thought during work.
Lisa, you're daydreaming again during work. It's not a good example for your subordinates.
Ryan, a salesperson from a client company, peeked at my face and spoke to me. He's about the same age as me, but looks so young that he could pass for his 20s. My colleagues also said he was handsome. Spring makes me sleepy. Let me guess, you ate too much lunch? We've known each other for a long time, so we can joke like this. Watching our interaction, some colleagues teased us, suggesting we should date. I just brushed it off, but then an unexpected event happened. Lisa, I want you to marry me. Ryan, who had been waiting for me at the exit after work, suddenly asked me out for a meal. I thought it was his usual joke, especially since we had been drinking, but it seemed he was serious. To be honest, I was a little interested in him, so I was happy to hear that. I asked him to wait a bit for my answer, and then I formally accepted. After we started dating, I began calling him Ryan by his first name. He always brought up new topics and was a great conversationalist, typical of the top salesperson. Since we knew each other from before, we never really had a big fight, and 6 months into the relationship, he proposed to me at a place with a beautiful night view. Of course, I said yes. Little did I know that this man would turn out to be incredible in ways I never imagined. After getting married, my husband was transferred to a department with more business trips.
The salary will be higher, and we'll have a more comfortable life.
I wanted him to stay by my side, but it seemed he had long wished for this transfer, and he was happy about moving to his desired department. He was away from home for half of the month, and even though we were newlyweds, maybe I should really get a cat. I started to seriously consider it. Having lived alone for a long time, I had no trouble spending time by myself. With my husband away, there was no need to cook elaborate meals. There were days when I just made simple dishes for dinner. The married life I had imagined when I was single was far different from reality, leaving me feeling a bit empty. My husband earned well, but as we didn't have children, I felt there was nothing for me to do at home, so I continued working.
Aren't you going to have kids?
At a drinking party, a colleague with children sympathetically asked me, but I just laughed it off with a haha. I wanted children sooner rather than later, considering my age, but it seemed my husband felt differently. He said he wanted to cherish our time as a couple, which made me a bit happy, but I also felt anxious. Someone who trampled on my feelings like this intruded. One day, as usual, my husband was on a business trip, and I was quietly having a drink alone when the doorbell rang. Seeing the person on the screen, I couldn't help but let out a sound. I couldn't just ignore it, so I let the person into my room.
Please call before you come, Mia. How many times do I have to tell you?
Not sure if my reluctance showed on my face. You always look so gloomy, Lisa.
Oh, Ryan is not home again? You guys aren't young anymore. Shouldn't you be more worried about having kids?
The one who would say such rude things so nonchalantly was my husband's mother, Mia. She barged into the room and finished off the bottle of wine I had opened. Then, without asking, she opened the refrigerator.
Oh, there's some expensive-looking meat.
I can take this, right, Lisa? It was an A5 grade steak I had bought as a treat for myself to cook the next day. Mia, my mother-in-law, would come to our house and pester me for things.
What? No, of course not.
I realized my mistake the moment I said it. Mia's face turned sour quickly.
Huh? Living a life of luxury with my son's earnings, and you can't even share a bit? Sit down.
Once she started, Mia was unstoppable, lecturing me endlessly. She would go on and on about how she raised her son with care, how she was strict to get him into a top university. She detailed the expenses of getting her son through college. Mia said these things, but I heard that it was my father-in-law who worked hard and earned money while Mia had always been a housewife. Maybe her frugality contributed to that. I've been subjected to this talk annoyingly many times. I've tried pretending not to be home, but she would knock on the door until I came out. Sometimes, I had to call my father-in-law to come and get her. Every time I saw him, he looked tired.
Come on, let's go home. Enough is enough.
Watching Mia being dragged away by him, I deeply realized that marriage isn't always about happiness. By the way, the steak was bought with my own money. As if I'd give it to Mia. Every time she appeared, I was glad we weren't living together. Then, one day it happened. I was relaxing on the sofa, sipping coffee on my day off, when…
What? What did you just say?
I couldn't hide my shock at my husband's words.
I said, divorce. My parents, they got divorced.
Tying his tie, my husband told me calmly. According to him, my father-in-law's anger towards Mia finally reached its limit. Of course, Mia refused the divorce. In the end, it turned into quite a battle, each hiring lawyers. The amount Mia demanded for the divorce was much higher than the norm, but my father-in-law agreed to it just to get away from Mia. My father-in-law's family was wealthy, and he himself was an executive of a large company. With that, Mia must have gotten quite a sum.
He always looked so worn out. It's good he's free from Mia now.
As I was thinking this, my husband said,
So, the house was Dad's, and he's already put it on the market.
What will Mia do now? As I was thinking, the doorbell rang. Not Mia again, I thought, but my guess was wrong. A uniformed delivery person stood there. I thought it was a courier and opened the door, but Mia was there with the delivery person. Confused.
Where should we take the stuff?
The delivery person asked, and Mia barged in. Please take it to the back room, she said. Thanks for agreeing to live together, Ryan.
You're such a wonderful son of mine.
I was completely left out. In no time, the spare room, which had been used for storage, was filled with her belongings, and it was transformed into Mia's living space.
What? I haven't heard anything about this. I can't just accept sudden cohabitation.
If it were the kind Mia, it wouldn't be a problem. But this Mia was different. As I desperately refused, both of them looked at me with puzzled faces.
Isn't it all the same whether we live together now or in the future? You'll take care of Mom then, Lisa.
My husband said such an absurd thing. Apparently, taking care of Mia was a foregone conclusion for me.
Absolutely not. This is ridiculous.
I'll divorce.
This is crazy. Stop making fun of me.
To this, they both started laughing at me as if I was a joke. Divorce? Try it. You'll be the pathetic one, you know?
You should be thankful I even married a leftover like you.
Hit with such harsh words, I felt everything go dark before my eyes. My husband said he married me for his social status. As he got older, more people around him were married, and marriage was a status symbol in society. He chose me because of my decent looks and good reputation, and he thought I seemed obedient, he said with a laugh at the end.
I'll never sign the divorce papers. Well, I'm off on a business trip again, so I'm leaving now.
Saying this, he left the house humming, leaving behind both me and the detested Mia. Watching me stand there dumbfounded, Mia said.
How pitiful, a woman unloved by men.
She retorted, laughing at me.
You're one to talk, having been divorced yourself.
That's what I said. Mia screamed, but I couldn't afford to waste my energy on this woman. I locked myself in my room, pondering how to get a divorce in my favor. I searched the internet, but my husband hadn't done anything particularly wrong. At most, he had the crazy Mia. Not even cheating. As I thought this, Mia banged on my room door so fiercely I thought it would break.
Come on! Get out here now!
Wondering what was happening, I came out to find several delicious-looking dishes on the table. Thinking Mia had prepared the meal, I sat down. Well, she's a bit nice after all. Just then.
Hey! What are you sitting down for? Pay up!
I looked where Mia was pointing and saw a confused delivery man at the door. Dumbfounded by Mia's stupidity, I said,
I won't pay for it.
Then I returned to my room and locked the door. She screamed outside for a while, but eventually quieted down. Seems like she paid for it herself. Good. From then on, Mia and I hardly exchanged words. I've heard of married couples living like strangers, but what was this relationship? I even thought about such trivial matters. My husband's visits home became even less frequent, and when he did come home, he and Mia would be having a party-like time. I was quietly preparing for divorce. The more I researched, the more shocking secrets about my foolish husband came to light. He was truly Mia's son. A real piece of work. Mia never cooked, relying on delivery for every meal. And she ordered a lot. Given her large size, it made sense. Once, I prepared a meal for Mia, but she threw it away, plate and all. When I found it, I was so frustrated I cried. Mia had always been stingy with money since the beginning of our marriage. Extremely reluctant to spend more than necessary. She had no problem coveting others' belongings. Once, after a bath, I was eating ice cream when she barged in unannounced.
I'll take one of those,
she said, and shamelessly ate one of the 2 ice creams in the package. A greedy and unpleasant person. I continued this life for nearly a year. Although Mia and I were living together, we barely saw each other, so it wasn't too hard. I considered moving out, but I didn't want to be seen as running away. More than that, the thought of the 2 of them falling into hell made me giddy.
Mia.
One day, when I suddenly spoke to her, Mia involuntarily shuddered.
What do you want? How about we go out for dinner together? Unlimited high-end lobster. Plus, it's unlimited time right now.
At my suggestion, Mia, always eager for a meal, was immediately interested.
I'll go, but you're paying, right?
As always, she was presumptuous, but I answered with a smile.
Of course.
Once Mia knew it was on me, she began ordering one dish after another at the restaurant.
I'll take 5 servings of premium lobster, same for shrimp and scallops. And then,
like a black hole, Mia devoured the meat continuously. Other customers glanced and whispered, laughing at her. I get it. She's practically a cow herself. Here's where my plan hit a snag. I intended to leave Mia at the restaurant and return home early, but she protested.
Eating alone is embarrassing.
That's what she said. I think you're embarrassing enough already. In the end, Mia, taking advantage of the unlimited time offer, silently ate meat for 3 hours. She even ate the meat I grilled, leaving me with only about 5 pieces. After 3 hours of that. When it was time to pay, the server said with a forced smile, "We look forward to seeing you again." But his eyes weren't smiling. He probably hoped never to see such a customer again.
Well, that was an okay restaurant.
I was infuriated that her first comment was that, after eating and drinking on someone else's dime. I was thinking of where to take her next when suddenly,
Ouch!
Mia collapsed, sweating profusely. And in obvious pain.
What happened?
Are you giving birth?
Don't joke at a time like this.
The cause of her stomach pain was obvious. In extreme pain, Mia panicked.
Hurry, this is serious. Call an ambulance, quickly.
I thought the real problem was her head and stomach, but to avoid further embarrassment from her loud cries, I did as she said and called an ambulance. Fortunately, it arrived in about 15 minutes. By then, Mia had quieted down, but she was crouching and holding her stomach in pain.
What happened?
The paramedic asked.
My stomach hurts.
Mia could barely speak.
We'll take her to a nearby hospital. Are you her daughter? Son's wife? Please come with us.
The paramedic asked me, but I replied.
Son's wife?
No.
I know her, but she's practically a stranger now. I think her stomach pain is because she ate meat nonstop for 3 hours at that lobster place.
I explained emotionlessly.
3 hours. I see.
The paramedic's face twisted in disbelief.
Well, I have urgent matters to attend to, so I'll leave now. Her son is around, so please contact him.
I said and ran off as fast as I could. From behind,
Wait! You stupid wife, remember this!
I heard Mia shout, but of course, I had no intention of remembering. I hurried home. When I arrived, the movers I had arranged were there too, and I left the house with my packed belongings. A few hours later, my mobile phone was bombarded with calls from my husband. The hospital must have contacted him.
Hey Lisa! What are you doing? Mom is in trouble.
What am I doing now? I'm sitting on my new sofa, elegantly drinking coffee. I retorted.
Don't joke! I came home and your stuff is gone, and there's a divorce petition. I'll never sign it.
My husband was furious, but I said,
Then it'll be through lawyers.
You should receive the official documents soon.
You have plenty of women, so it shouldn't be a problem, right?
As I laughed, he whispered,
Huh.
In a small voice. I had hired a detective agency to gather information on my husband for a favorable divorce. And what a surprise. One evidence after another came out. I quickly found out about a woman he was involved with in Chicago. Just as I thought that was it, there was a woman in Los Angeles, then New Orleans, and recently Denver. The number was so high that my female lawyer and I joked. Where do you think the next one will be? I bet Atlanta. We even had the luxury to guess the next affair location. After all this, gathering evidence against him took a lot of time and money, but thinking about him going to hell made it all seem worth it. I hated my husband that much. I didn't leave that house because I wanted to save on rent. It was also a part of my small pride, a determination not to lose. I planned to demand a security deposit for the divorce lawsuit from all the women involved, but it turned out my husband had pretended to be single. I thought he was the lowest of the low. However, one of the women he deceived reported his misdeeds to the company where he worked. As a result, he was demoted to a minor subsidiary and, with his pride wounded, he quit the company. It seemed the matter with the women was settled through settlements. I heard it cost a pretty penny. I thought, serves him right, from the bottom of my heart. Eventually, our divorce was successfully finalized. I made sure he paid the full amount I had asked for the divorce security deposit. The source of the money? He had to sell his stocks and savings from before we were married, and it still wasn't enough. Most of it was paid by Mia, my ex-mother-in-law. Despite receiving a substantial amount from her ex-husband during their divorce, it seemed she had nearly run out of money. She must have been shocked to see her son in such a mess after she got out of the hospital. Good riddance. By the way, Mia's stomach pain turned out to be appendicitis, not food poisoning. Seems like her stomach is just as unbelievable as ever. Mia always focused on academic credentials, but I thought she should have taught her son other important lessons. As for my ex-husband, his final choice of woman was, disgustingly, a colleague from my workplace. It was the same married colleague who kept nagging me. Aren't you going to have kids? Having an affair with someone else's husband while being married herself, how foolish. I made sure to demand a security deposit from her. But this colleague hadn't realized she was just one of many, and their relationship ended quickly. It seems she got divorced too. Once, on my way to work, I saw my ex-husband and Mia in shabby clothes. The once handsome man had lost his hair due to stress, looking like a defeated samurai. Almost unrecognizable, appearing in his 50s. Mia, once so plump, had lost a lot of weight. They both looked like they were living on the streets. It was none of my business. As for me, I continued working but requested a transfer to an affiliate company. Thankfully, my take-home pay remained the same, and I continued my previous lifestyle. One thing has changed. When I come home and say, "I'm back," two adorable cats come to greet me, twining around my feet.
Wait a bit, I'll feed you soon.
A friend was looking for a home for two sibling cats, and I finally got my long-desired pets. For them, I moved to a pet-friendly apartment. Every day is now a storm of affection. For now, I've had enough of marriage. I plan to spend my days happily with these cute cats.
Turns out, she's just cuter and more vulnerable than you, which makes me want to protect her. You know, men are drawn to protect women who appear weaker.
My husband boasted, his face swollen with arrogance. This came after I'd stumbled upon his affair and confronted him, only to be met with a string of excuses and outright defiance. He sought my agreement, but there was no way I could nod along. Furthermore, he had no intention of leaving me or breaking things off with his mistress. Continuing a marriage with such a man was out of the question. So, I packed my bags, returned to my childhood home, and vented to my brother, Daniel. After hearing me out, Daniel broke into a broad smile.
Well, that's great news. What's great about it?
Hearing about my sister being cheated on, and his first reaction is that's great? I couldn't help but yell at him, but Daniel just kept smiling. And then, I noticed the fierce anger hidden behind his smile, an emotion that didn't quite match his expression. My name is Arya, and I'm 31 years old. Anthony, my husband, was a colleague at the same company. Since joining, we'd consult each other on work, collaborate, and eventually became friends who could talk about anything. We'd often go out for drinks, discussing not just work but also personal matters, deepening our bond. After a company party a few months later, Anthony confessed his feelings for me as we were leaving. Attracted to his bright, sociable nature and his kindness, I didn't hesitate to accept his proposal, and we began dating. Our relationship flourished as we continued to share meals and consult each other on work. Both of us loved exploring new places, leading to trips on weekends and vacations abroad. Spending more time with Anthony, I found myself increasingly drawn to him, eventually realizing I wanted to be with him forever. That moment in our 5th year at the company, when Anthony surprised me with a proposal, remains unforgettable. In a private room of a glamorous restaurant, opening the ring box, I was so moved that tears wouldn't stop. I had no reason to refuse, so I immediately accepted the proposal. We both loved breathtaking views, especially the sea, where we had many memories, so we decided to have our wedding in a place overlooking the ocean. Blessed with good weather, it was the best day. I enjoyed my work and wanted to continue discussing it with Anthony even after getting married, but working in the same environment as a couple was difficult, so I ended up transferring to another branch, although my job didn't change much. 3 years into our marriage, we were still happily living together. We would dine out several times a month and travel a few times a year. Our relationship with Anthony's parents was good, and we were living a happy married life. To anyone looking in, we must have seemed like the perfect couple. Indeed, I felt that way too. But that feeling lasted only until this day. Since the next day was a holiday, we had planned to dine out late after work, as we usually did. However, when work was winding down, I received a message from Anthony.
Sorry, Arya. I got invited to dinner by a client tonight, and I can't say no since they've been really good to us recently. I won't be able to make it to our dinner.
I felt lonely but said, I see. Can't be helped. I was looking forward to trying that restaurant, so let's go another time.
Sure, I'll make it up to you. I'll probably be late tonight, so don't wait up. Bye.
Anthony quickly ended the call. As I was about to leave work, my phone rang again. It was from my friend Camila. Hello?
Hey, Arya. Are you free tonight? Wanna grab a drink? It's been a while.
Actually, that works out. Anthony is out to dinner with a client tonight. Camila is my best friend. We're colleagues at the same company, though now we work in different departments. She gave a speech at my wedding and sometimes comes over to our place. Since she and Anthony were also hired at the same time, we've hung out as a trio several times, being drinking buddies with Anthony. It's always more fun when the three of us get together. Sometimes, like today, she'd call out of the blue, and we'd meet up for a casual drink when available. We decided to meet at the station near my house, so I left the office and headed to the station. The train arrived just in time, and I got to the station quite early, but Camila was already there waiting. Sorry to keep you.
Long time no see. I just got here too.
After exchanging a few words, we headed to a restaurant. There's a fairly large entertainment district on the way from the station to our house. And we entered a restaurant just off the main street of this area. We started with a toast with beer and then moved on to catching up, as usual.
How's it going recently? Anthony doing well?
Yeah, he's fine. Just the usual, you know? Work has settled down for now, so it's not as busy or tiring. How about you, Camila? Were you working around here today?
Exactly. This area falls under my jurisdiction, so I come here occasionally. On the contrary, I've been swamped with clients since the beginning of the month. I'm truly exhausted every day. At this rate, no man will come near me.
Camila is the epitome of a career woman. Though attractive in face and figure, her blunt personality and strong will seem to keep men at bay. After sharing what's on our minds and feeling the mutual encouragement to keep pushing forward, we left the restaurant in the usual high spirits. This entertainment district has a really nice vibe. Mind if we take a slow walk back? To that, I replied. Sure, a walk to the station will help sober us up. And so, we decided to stroll through the bustling streets towards the station. As we walked, our conversation continued. Arya, you're lucky. You've got a good husband, and it seems like your married life is going well. Are you thinking about having kids anytime soon? Well, we don't really talk about it much. We both love our jobs, and I worry about how pregnancy might affect my work. We're thinking someday, but it's hard to find the right timing. While discussing this, a certain restaurant came into view. It was the place Anthony and I had planned to dine at tonight. The windows were absent, replaced by glass walls allowing a dim view into the elegant interior. The orange chandeliers inside, deliberately subdued, caught my eye. Just as I thought, I'd like to come here next time, I recognized a familiar figure. I stopped in my tracks. Arya, what's wrong? Unable to respond to Camila, my gaze was fixed on the restaurant. There was Anthony, seated across from an unfamiliar woman. She appeared slightly younger than me, dressed in revealing clothing. Anthony had said he was dining with a client tonight, but the woman across from him hardly seemed like a business associate. They were chatting and laughing together. "Isn't that Anthony? What's going on?" Camila seemed to have noticed Anthony inside as well. I was too shocked to know what to do. Seeing my state, Camila suggested,
Arya, maybe you should confront him directly?
"Yeah, you're right." I took out my mobile phone from my bag and took a photo of Anthony and the unknown woman. As I began to calm down, anger started to bubble up. Upon reaching the station, Camila offered,
"Should I come with you to confront him? Having both of us there might make Anthony more likely to tell the truth."
"Thanks, but it's a family matter. I'll talk to him myself." I declined her offer and we parted ways. On my way home, I struggled to contain the growing anger. About an hour after I arrived home, Anthony returned. "I'm home."
"Welcome back. How was dinner with the client?"
"It was tough, you know. They wanted to go to a second place, and they drink a lot. But I think I made a good impression." Right after he finished speaking, I pointed my mobile phone at him, showing him the photo.
"This person is from your client? She looks quite young. Dressed not quite for work. Did she change before meeting you, Anthony?"
"What? Why? You didn't follow me, did you?"
"Of course not. I was dining out with Camila. We just happened to see this on our way back." "Is this person really a client? Choosing such a fancy restaurant for dinner, from which company is she?"
"Well, what? Can't answer?"
"She's not someone you need to hide from me, right?"
"Sorry."
"Sorry? You mean this is an affair? She's your mistress? Hey! Answer me."
"Yes." I broke down crying.
"Why? Why would you do this? I thought we were doing fine."
"It's your fault, Arya. You're always busy with work, and though you take care of home, I wanted you to pay more attention to me. You're straightforward and strong, but she's cute and makes me want to protect her. Eventually, I found it more enjoyable to be with her than with you." Hearing those words was a shock. No longer feeling any affection from him. Clearly preferring his affair partner. I would have preferred he just said it was a friends with benefits. I couldn't stay any longer, packed what I needed, and left the house. Dragging my carry-on, I caught the last train home. The journey back home felt longer than usual. I don't remember what I was thinking. Maybe I was too hurt to think about anything. Next thing I knew, I was in front of my parents' house. I had a key but hadn't called ahead, so I rang the doorbell. Daniel, my brother, opened the entrance door. "Daniel? Hey! Long time no see. What brings you here at this hour?" Daniel is a workaholic. After graduating, he worked for a major company for 3 years before starting his own business. His sales have been growing steadily, and now he's the president of a company with dozens of employees. He hardly ever comes home, and he couldn't even attend my wedding due to an important business meeting. I knew Daniel got married a year ago from our parents, but since there was no wedding ceremony, I had only briefly greeted his wife, with whom I hadn't formed a close connection. It had been years since I last saw Daniel.
"Daniel, what about you? How are Mom and Dad?"
Haha. What about me? It's my parents' house too. I finally got a long vacation, so I thought I'd come back and do some filial piety. By the way, they're currently on a trip to Hawaii, using the travel vouchers I gave them. Never thought I'd be house-sitting." His cheerful demeanor hadn't changed. A bit too carefree, but he's the type to make bold moves. I could imagine his employees finding it a pleasant place to work. "So, what brings you here at this time, Arya?" I was taken aback by Daniel's presence, momentarily forgetting why I had come home. "Sorry. I just had some trouble at home."
I was hoping to stay here for a while.
Ah, of course. It's not my house, but it's fine. Your room is available, so come on in. Once you're settled, I'll make some coffee and you can tell me all about it. I felt comforted by Daniel's warmth. After setting down my bags, I decided to take a shower to freshen up. I felt a bit better, but I couldn't calm down. Anger was bubbling up inside me. When I entered the living room, Daniel was watching TV. Refreshed? I'll make some coffee then. As Daniel turned off the TV and I sat down, I began to tell him about the day's events over coffee. How we had been getting along as a married couple. How we had planned to go out to dinner as usual. How he canceled because he said he was going out to dinner with a client. How I ended up drinking with Camila. And, showing the photo on my mobile phone to Daniel, I told him.
On the way back from drinking, I saw Anthony and this woman at the restaurant we were supposed to go to. When I confronted him after he came home, he admitted to having an affair with her, saying she was cuter and made him want to protect her more than me.
I told the story through tears. Daniel listened to me until the end, looking at my mobile phone. When I finished, he looked up and said something I never expected. I thought Daniel would comfort me, tell me to leave such a man, and be on my side. However, Daniel, with a wide smile, said,
"Arya, that's great."
I slammed my hands on the table and stood up in disbelief.
"How is that great?"
I said, returning to my room. I couldn't understand why Daniel would say that. Just thinking about it made me even angrier. I shouldn't have said anything. I regretted talking to Daniel as I lay down on the bed. I didn't want to return to the house where Anthony was, so I stayed at my parents' house. Daniel and I didn't talk much after that day. It was tough that I commute to work from my parents' house during the weekdays. It took twice as long as usual. I spent my time thinking about how hard it would be to file for divorce and demand compensation. A week later, on the weekend, I decided to relax in my room and play some mobile games, enjoying a leisurely time for the first time in a while. Just as I was thinking about getting some lunch, the doorbell rang.
Who could that be?
It was unusual to have visitors, so I went to the entrance. Then, there was Anthony. And he was apologizing to Daniel, who stood there imposingly. Why, though? Shouldn't he be apologizing to me, not Daniel? Then I heard Daniel's voice.
"I never imagined the other party would be you. I'm sorry, I didn't know."
Anthony was still apologizing to Daniel.
"Layla's cuter and needs protection, huh?"
Layla? The only Layla I knew was Daniel's wife. Confused, Daniel continued.
"Lately, Layla's been acting restless and clearly hiding something from me. Her expressions when I talked to her weren't right, so I started suspecting an affair. I was considering hiring a detective, and right then, Arya came back home. I was shocked when Arya showed me a photo of your affair, and there was Layla in it. Sad but also surprised that it was a family member involved. You never know what's going to happen. This will make the divorce court and compensation claims easier, though."
I was speechless. Turns out, Anthony's affair partner was Daniel's wife, Layla. The woman Anthony had been dining with wore heavy makeup, completely unrecognizable to me. It had been a while since I last saw her, and I didn't remember her wearing that much makeup.
"When you contacted me, I truly felt sorry for what I had done. I will cut off all contact with Layla, so please forgive me."
Apparently, Daniel had reached out to Anthony about the affair. Daniel noticed me standing there, stunned.
"Oh, Arya. You heard the conversation?"
"Yeah, most of it."
"Good. Now we have all the information we need on Anthony and Layla, his affair partner. This will make it easier to file for compensation in the divorce proceedings. It's good you came home, Arya,"
Daniel said to me with a smile. So that's what it was. At that moment, I understood the meaning behind Daniel's words from a week ago. Why he had said that's great. What was Daniel feeling at that time? He was trying to comfort me, but maybe he was also speaking to himself. Thinking about Daniel's feelings, I decided to divorce Anthony and claim compensation in the divorce proceedings.
Arya. It's my fault. Please forgive me. I can't pay the compensation if you demand it in the divorce proceedings.
I ignored Anthony's plea for help.
I'll contact you later with the details. Be prepared.
Daniel then kicked Anthony out of the house. Afterward, Daniel told Layla about the divorce and filed for compensation. Layla initially resisted but seemed to accept the demands after discussing Anthony. I also demanded a divorce and compensation from Anthony. After being clearly told by Daniel, Anthony complied without resistance. When the divorce was finalized, I received a call. It was from Anthony's mother. Expecting a scolding, I hesitantly answered, but heard an apology instead. She was sincerely sorry for his actions. It seemed Anthony blamed Layla for the divorce, and Layla blamed Anthony, leading to their breakup. His parents apologized repeatedly for their son's inadequacies and said they had disowned him. Hearing this from them, I felt a sense of relief. Anthony was now disowned by his parents, with no one to turn to, left alone. I decided to start anew. Every month, the compensation from Anthony was deposited, but one day, he showed up at my parents' house, asking to reduce the compensation.
Please, can you reduce the compensation?
No way.
Do you understand how I felt being cheated on? There's no reducing the compensation unless my feelings are healed.
Leave. I turned him away. Yet, he kept coming back, week after week, asking for a reduction.
The compensation won't change no matter how many times you come. If you keep this up, I'll call the police.
I responded calmly. But Anthony apparently didn't believe I would actually call the police. His demands eventually shifted from reducing the compensation to stopping payments entirely, even suggesting a condescending offer of reconciliation. When I started calling the police right in front of him, Anthony changed his demeanor and fled from the house. The police advised me not to open the door anymore and to install a monitor-equipped doorbell to use if I recognized him. Fearing the police, Anthony resorted to sending lengthy text messages and making phone calls. After changing my email and phone number, things finally quieted down. However, Anthony tried to visit the branch where I worked without any business, and even enlisted colleagues to try to contact me, becoming a nuisance at both the main and branch offices. Once, I received a message from Camila. Working close to Anthony's department at the headquarters, Camila had been keeping a close eye on Anthony's current situation. Anthony, having begged a colleague to reach out to me, had his divorce exposed, and his harassment became known due to being spotted near my house during his commute. Realizing no one was on his side, feeling uncomfortable under their gazes and attitudes, he voluntarily resigned from the company. Despite his job search efforts, he struggled to find employment. And, unfortunately, joined a company involved in illegal activities. Desperate, he pleaded with the HR department to rehire him. Having abandoned all his responsibilities for his own convenience, there was no place for Anthony upon his attempted return. He was swiftly turned down, and Anthony, lacking the courage to resign a second time, endured a harsh life of commuting with the first train and working unpaid overtime until the last train. On the other hand, Layla had reached out several times, wondering if there was any chance to reconcile. However, Daniel recognized there was no love left. Like Anthony, Layla had quit her job upon the scandal becoming known, hoping to escape the situation. Sometime after the divorce, fearing poverty, Layla pleaded with Daniel, unable to pay the divorce settlement, and asked for a chance to start over. Daniel, seeing her focus solely on money, realized her true intentions. Refusing to reconcile or reduce the settlement, Layla claimed she couldn't pay because she had no money, failing to contribute a cent. Daniel, undeterred, contacted her parents. They were unaware of the divorce. They hurriedly apologized and paid on her behalf. Layla thought this settled everything, but her parents, having only covered the costs temporarily, demanded repayment and were furious. Now, Layla works under strict conditions at her parents' farm, which they manage. Since then, Daniel and I have been in touch more frequently. Sharing updates, how we've been, and the freshness of reconnecting after a long time brings a sense of family appreciation. Daniel continues to lead a busy life with work but seems to enjoy his days. It took me a while to recover. The shock of the affair and the loss of my married life brought stress. But support from family, bosses, seniors, and friends helped me view the experience positively. Now, without considering marriage, I'm enjoying my single life. I'll leave the kid for you to take care. As I wondered what he meant, Thomas uttered something unbelievable. Apparently, he was taking advantage of our current separation to live with his affair partner. He wanted to divorce me, right after my mother passed away, to marry his mistress. I had heard that separation is often treated like divorce, making it hard to claim compensation for infidelity after separating. Not caring anymore, I hung up the phone. 3 days later, I had 23 missed calls from Thomas on my mobile phone. But I thought his actions were despicable and didn't respond, just blocked his number. However, Thomas was persistent. He even sent texts through social media, which he normally never uses. That's when I decided to fight back against Thomas.
Fine, if that's how you want it, I'll show you hell.
Thomas, who didn't even attend my mother's funeral and was planning an elopement with his mistress, didn't deserve any sympathy. I was determined to pay him back double for everything he had done to us. My name is Sandra, a 46-year-old part-time worker and a housewife. My family consists of my husband Thomas, a year older than me, and our 16-year-old daughter in high school, Margaret. We lived in a small apartment in the countryside. I got married when I was 23, but after discovering I was infertile, it took 5 years of fertility treatments to finally have our long-awaited daughter. But after Margaret was born, I struggled with first-time parenting. Gradually, I lost my peace of mind and left the company I worked for, temporarily becoming a full-time housewife. In our society, whenever Margaret got sick, I, her mother, was called to accompany her to the hospital. This was what led me to quit my job. It wasn't that I hated caring for Margaret, but my boss indirectly suggested I resign, and I couldn't bear it and ran away. Eventually, staying at home all the time seemed depressing, so I put Margaret in daycare and started earning a bit as a part-time worker. Both Thomas and I couldn't forget the hardship of 5 years of fertility treatment, and we eventually settled on having just Margaret. I first noticed something was off with Thomas when Margaret was in upper elementary school. Margaret was academically gifted, so I really wanted her to try for private middle school. Margaret was positive about the idea of middle school entrance exams, and we even attended open campus events together to choose the best school. Thomas earned enough for us to live comfortably, even with me as a housewife. Plus, I was prepared to use my savings from before marriage or untouched part-time earnings for Margaret's education funds. But Thomas was adamantly against it. No. He was unyielding in his refusal to let Margaret take the exams.
What's the point of a middle school entrance exam? Let her go to a regular middle school, that's enough for Margaret. Isn't the entrance exam something for daughters of company presidents or something?
No matter how I tried to convince him, Thomas stubbornly refused. Finally, losing patience, I told Margaret,
"You can take the exam if you want. I want to support what you want to do. Just focus on your studies without any worries."
But Margaret just shook her head, looking sorry. She probably hated seeing us argue over her future. That's when I realized it. I shouldn't be showing this side of us to our child. I started to be extra careful not to get into intense arguments with Thomas for Margaret's sake. That marked the beginning of a life walking on eggshells around Thomas. But the more I tried to be careful, the more sensitive I became, and even trivial things would turn into arguments.
Hey, I've been meaning to say this for a while. Isn't this stew too salty? I've always hated this kind of seasoning.
Thomas suddenly confessed that he never liked my cooking. After our argument about the entrance exam, it seemed like he no longer held back. He started criticizing without care. For example, He started saying he didn't like Worcestershire sauce or that he always hated the tomatoes in his sandwiches. He kept going on about it at the dinner table, making me feel quite bad. So, reluctantly, I stopped adding tomatoes, which I used to make the dishes look good, and carrots, which he also said he didn't like.
I don't want your lunch anymore. It doesn't look good and I lose my appetite.
I responded to his requests, but to that he threw away the lunch I made. Fed up with his constant complaints, I finally exploded in anger.
Then eat out. If you're going to complain that much, I won't make your sandwiches ever again.
And from that point on, I stopped making sandwiches for Thomas altogether. A turning point came sometime later. It was when Margaret, who was attending a public middle school, was about to face high school entrance exams. Despite attending public school, she participated in an archery club outside of school and achieved a national competition placement. Margaret was also academically successful and skilled at piano, a hobby I had introduced to her. She always looked forward to her weekly lessons. She was an all-rounder, diligent, and even serving as the vice president of the student council. Although I had reluctantly made her give up on middle school entrance exams, I hoped this time she could attend the high school of her choice. When I asked about her preferred high school, she named a renowned private school within the state.
I wasn't sure if I should say it, but I really want to go here. It's a prestigious school for archery, and I'll work hard for it.
I nodded emphatically at Margaret's words. Margaret had started to accommodate her father Thomas, always putting herself last. She would decline offers to buy books or clothes she wanted.
It's okay.
Even when I gave her these as birthday gifts, she looked apologetic. Seeing my child like this filled me, as a mother, with a sense of helplessness. That's why I wanted to make her bravely spoken dream a reality. I reassured her that we could afford it with my savings and education insurance. However, when I informed Thomas about Margaret's educational aspirations, predictably, he flatly refused. No way.
Attending a private high school in the state means she can't commute from here. So, she'll need a dorm or an apartment, right? I won't allow it. It's a waste of money.
His words infuriated me. Calling the education expenses for our only daughter a waste? I couldn't hold back.
You opposed to her middle school exams too. Why do you always say such things? Doesn't she deserve to live her life the way she wants?
But my words seemed to have no effect on Thomas. He sighed theatrically and exclaimed,
No, private school and living alone as a high school student are a waste of money. If she doesn't go to a local public high school, I won't support you guys financially anymore.
At that moment, I snapped.
Fine, have it your way. But don't complain about whatever we decide to do. I'll figure it out, so you go ahead and apply to the high school you want. There's no need for you to compromise this time. Okay? Do as you wish.
I encouraged Margaret again, but she looked worried. But she hesitated. Even so, I repeatedly reassured her.
It's okay.
And it seemed that Margaret had made up her mind. The following spring, Margaret successfully got into her first choice high school.
Mom, I did it.
Margaret returned from school with a beaming smile and shared the news. There's no parent who wouldn't be overjoyed at their child's successful high school entrance. I made a red velvet cake and praised her like crazy. Although there were tough times, she had done well. However, Thomas, not celebrating this achievement, said something awful.
As promised, you take care of Margaret and yourself from now on. I won't contribute to the household expenses anymore.
And just like that, he coldly stated his decision and stopped providing for the household expenses. Margaret would be moving into the high school dormitory soon. For me, knowing that my parenting phase was somewhat coming to an end and having already decided to work as a regular employee at a hospital where an acquaintance worked, I didn't think I would struggle financially. Therefore, Thomas's words and actions didn't bother me anymore. Months had passed since Margaret started high school. She had adapted to her new life, and I was relieved to hear that. I was working part-time, similar to full-time hours, at a hospital where an acquaintance worked, with an expectation of being made a full-time employee soon. I thought we wouldn't struggle financially. Thus, Thomas's words and actions didn't bother me anymore. Although Thomas and I hadn't divorced yet, we had been living separately for months after he moved out to a different apartment. I was busy with my new life, but realizing I could live without Thomas, I planned to divorce him as soon as everything was ready. I assumed Thomas wouldn't want to continue this separation forever either. Believing this separation would end one way or another, I went to the city office to get divorce papers. But then, I received devastating news. My mom back home had passed away. When I got the call from my dad, I was so shocked that I collapsed. Mom had always been frail, in and out of hospitals since I was young. I remembered praying with Dad for her successful surgeries. I knew she had been battling cancer for a year now and understood that her time was limited. Still, the news of her passing was hard to accept. Dad, having lost his lifelong partner, looked utterly defeated and downcast. He clearly lacked the strength to act as the representative of the family at the funeral. So, I stepped up to take on that role. Being an only child, there was no one else who could do it. Dad weakly smiled at my offer. "That would be a great help," he said in a faint voice. We hadn't told anyone about our separation, not even Dad or our acquaintances. So, I thought it best to invite Thomas to the funeral. I quickly sent him a text with details about Mom's passing and the funeral arrangements. As expected, there was no reply. On the day of the funeral, Thomas didn't show up, and Margaret, who had come home for the occasion, muttered, "He's the worst." Even Dad, who looked so frail, was angry, feeling insulted for his wife and daughter. I had my own grievances against Thomas, but now wasn't the time for that.
Both of you, I feel the same way. But do you want to send her off with angry faces? Mom always said, nothing can beat a smile, didn't she?
My words reminded Dad and Margaret of Mom's cheerful nature. We managed to regain our composure and give Mom a proper send-off. That night, Thomas finally called back, but with an insensitive remark. "I'll leave the kid for you to take care." In such a situation, what was he thinking? As I silently pondered, Thomas, unasked, began to talk volubly. "Let me put it simple. I'm planning to elope with my girlfriend. She's younger and cuter than you." Apparently, he was living with his mistress, using our separation to his advantage, and wanted to divorce me right after my mom's death so he could marry her. I've heard separation is often treated like divorce, making it hard to claim alimony for infidelity afterwards. But for me, such things didn't matter anymore. "Oh, really? Do as you please," I replied and hung up the phone. 3 days later, I had 23 missed calls from Thomas on my mobile phone. Thinking how despicable he was, I didn't respond and blocked his number. When he realized I wasn't going to answer the phone, he started sending apologies through social media. That's when I decided to fight back against Thomas.
"Fine, if that's how you want it, I'll show you hell."
Thomas had declared abandoning me and Margaret at the time of my mother's funeral, and on top of that, he was planning an elopement with his mistress. Mercy was unnecessary for someone like him who had mistreated us. I decided to pay him back double for everything he had done. I immediately texted to Thomas.
"Let's meet tomorrow."
The next day, I waited for Thomas at the cafe where we had agreed to meet. A few minutes later, Thomas arrived in a hurry, his face pale and clearly agitated. I had nothing to say to him. So, I just silently, or perhaps glaringly, stared at him. Thomas, unnerved by my uncharacteristically explicit attitude, slowly began to speak. "I truly regret not being able to attend your mom's funeral. But there's a reason. I'm a bit shaken, you know, it was just bad timing." Curious, I listened to his explanation. Apparently, one of Thomas's relatives had collapsed and was in critical condition, needing surgery to have a chance of survival.
"So what? If surgery is the only option, then just do it." What does that have to do with anything else?
Thomas's face twisted in anguish as he replied. It's a complex surgical procedure that can't be done in a normal hospital. So, it's going to be expensive, and insurance won't cover it. According to Thomas, it was an advanced medical operation that had to be paid entirely out of pocket. His family decided to pool money, and Thomas had to contribute around $10,000. I was astounded. How could he so easily spin such lies?
It's not Betty or Richard, it's some relative I've never even met, right?
When I coldly responded, Thomas turned red with anger.
Don't be so cold. You, who just lost your mother, should understand my feelings.
I understood, but it was an entirely different issue.
First of all, the timing of your relative's illness right after my mother's death is suspicious. And is it really a disease that requires advanced medical treatment? What's the diagnosis? How much will the surgery cost in total?
As I pressed him with my thoughts, Thomas stumbled over his words and fell silent. My family, being well-known local landowners, had savings close to $1 million, which I was aware of. Even though Thomas might not know the details, he knew my family was wealthy, so I suspected he was after the inheritance. Given his past behavior, I couldn't trust him, even if he genuinely needed a significant amount of money for a medical issue. I sighed exaggeratedly and then continued.
What you and I need to discuss are divorce, custody, and division of assets.
That's all. But then Thomas pleaded.
Wait. I'll never do anything to make you sad again. Reconsider, please.
His face was contorted, clearly desperate to change the situation. I spoke again, more firmly.
I can't have any hope for a future with you anymore. If you feel sorry, please proceed with the divorce.
Saying that, I stood up, paid only for my coffee, and left. That night, Thomas unexpectedly showed up at our house.
Hey, I know you're in there, open the door.
When Thomas left to start our separation, he said he'd never return and left the keys, so naturally, he couldn't get in. However, at that moment, I was in the bathroom and didn't notice Thomas's arrival. It appeared that Margaret had responded instead, and when I noticed something was amiss and went to the front door, I saw the two of them. Margaret was home for the summer holidays, and had been staying with us since the funeral. What I saw was Thomas deeply apologizing and Margaret standing tall, looking down on him.
What's going on?
Thomas, what are you doing here? Thomas looked up, begging for forgiveness.
Please, I'm begging you. Can you just lend me $10,000 as an advance on the property division?
I thought he had come to apologize, but he was still asking for money. It became clear that Thomas didn't care about me or Margaret. Frustrated, I almost let my anger take over but managed to hold back. I wanted to yell and drive him away, but I knew running away wasn't an option anymore. For Margaret's sake, this separation needed to be resolved quickly. After taking a deep breath to calm myself, I said to Thomas,
That's irrelevant now. I already told you I wouldn't help you out with that. We handled my mother's funeral with my relatives, and you were not involved. Therefore, I don't see any need to care for a relative of yours I've never met.
Thomas seemed to lose his words in response, as if he had nothing to say back. Thomas had always been hands-off with my family matters, whether it was hospitalization or funerals. Yet, now that he was in a bind, he wanted my help, which was far too convenient. Realizing that nothing he said would change my mind, Thomas turned to Margaret.
Margaret, you tell Mom too. To you, a relative of your father is family too, right? Come on, please. You're kind-hearted, you'd feel bad knowing a family member is sick, right?
Typically quiet, and when he did speak it was usually sarcastic, but in such moments, Thomas became talkative. And now, he was clinging to the daughter he tried to abandon for his mistress, having not even paid for her high school. I felt a headache coming on. I endured a lot for Margaret's sake, but maybe it would have been better to have divorced from the start and lived just the two of us. But it was too late for regrets now. I wondered what Margaret was thinking. Maybe she'd be moved by her father's words and try to persuade me. But as embarrassing as it was for me to have even considered that for a moment, Margaret responded with a resolute expression. "Who are you?" Both Thomas and I were stunned by her response. It wasn't rejection or comfort, but a denial of his very existence. Watching Margaret's composed face, I felt relieved. Impressed by the strength of my grown-up daughter, Margaret continued without looking at Thomas.
"You said you're leaving the kid to mom, right? So, you've essentially abandoned your parental rights. You're divorcing mom and going with your mistress, aren't you?"
It seemed Margaret had overheard my phone conversation with Thomas. I thought I had been discreet, but she must have had her own thoughts about her father not attending the funeral. To her, a man who was separated and unfaithful, saying he didn't need her, was nothing more than a stranger. She declared him an outsider. That left Thomas utterly devastated, frozen in place. Margaret sighed deeply and glared at him.
"After all the obstacles you've put in my path, don't try to act like a father now. To me, the only parent is mom. I don't care about someone who didn't even show up for my beloved grandmother's funeral."
Thomas stayed motionless for a while, but gradually seemed to grasp Margaret's words. Rising up with a furious look, he stared at Margaret.
"You ungrateful child! Do you know how much I've sacrificed for you? If you're going to say that, then pay back all the school fees I've paid up till middle school."
How childish was he? Who demands repayment for raising their own child? It made me nauseous to think he was my husband. Thomas, about to say something more, stepped closer to us. Margaret, sensing fear, stepped back. But just then, we heard the siren of a police car and saw it stop in front of the apartment. Thomas halted his advance and slowly turned around. Outside, the people I faced were our neighbors, their expressions even more daunting than Thomas's. Caught up in the commotion with Thomas, I hadn't realized I left the front door open. The walls of the apartment are thin, and many people were home during the evening hours. A neighbor, having heard the ruckus, apparently called the police. When Thomas realized the police were there for him, he became visibly flustered, losing all his previous bravado. The officers stepped out of the patrol car and came straight to us to inquire about the situation. Our neighbors had reported Thomas as a suspicious person. I've always had a good relationship with my neighbors. And when I mentioned my mother's funeral, they even said,
"Please let us pay our respects."
So they attended, and noticing that Thomas was absent, I had candidly explained. Remembering how they had unanimously condemned Thomas's absence and behavior recently, it was no surprise they called the police when they heard him causing a scene. Thomas always said neighborhood relations were unnecessary, but in that moment, I was grateful for our close-knit community. And the police didn't irresponsibly leave the scene unresolved. Thomas desperately tried to clear up the misunderstanding.
"I'm the head of this household. What's wrong with a husband returning to his wife and daughter's home? This is just a little family disagreement, nothing that needs to trouble the police."
That's what he was pleading. His earnest plea only sparked a chorus of boos from onlookers. The officer calmed the crowd and then asked me if Thomas's claims were true. I answered honestly.
"I'm embarrassed to say, but we are currently separated. My husband already has someone else, and we were ready for divorce. I've even prepared the divorce papers."
The officer believed my story and instructed Thomas to return to his current residence. The neighbors, who had been watching from a distance, emanated an aura of "go back home already." Thomas still seemed eager to argue, but I told him,
"This won't solve anything. Besides, when we separated, this house was transferred to my name, and I've been paying the rent. Don't just barge in."
He had no reply to that. Margaret then chimed in, echoing my sentiment.
"Officer, I'm scared of this man."
That seemed to be the final straw. The police, recognizing the need to protect Margaret, a minor, firmly told Thomas,
"Dad, it's time to go home."
Facing the backlash, Thomas realized his efforts were futile and dejectedly left. 2 weeks have passed since Thomas's visit. I consulted a lawyer about the incident and decided to proceed with the divorce, seeking their assistance. Given Thomas's behavior, a straightforward discussion seemed unlikely. The lawyer agreed, confirming my decision was right. Finally, the day came to speak with Thomas again. He appeared dejected, but I unceremoniously handed him the documents without a word. Thomas browsed through them, puzzled at first, but his expression turned to one of shock.
Wait, what is this? How did you find this out?
The document detailed a compensation claim against Thomas and his mistress. All of Thomas's previous behavior was a facade. While it was true he had an affair, the woman had instigated him to play a part.
If the mother-in-law had passed away, Sandra will inherit something, right? Just shake her up a bit, and she'll probably want to settle with money. It'll be easier for us to get married. How about getting around $10,000?
The story about needing money for advanced medical treatment for a sick family member was a lie. It was a fictional scenario created to swindle money from me. I had felt uneasy about the whole situation. After the funeral, Thomas had called nonchalantly, ready to break up, but then suddenly turned desperate by dawn. I suspected there was more to it. The timing was too convenient. Trusting my intuition, right after Thomas's call, I secretly hired a private investigator to conduct a background check. With Thomas openly admitting his affair, he made no attempt to hide his infidelity, making gathering evidence straightforward. Furthermore, emboldened by his admission, he was captured toasting with his mistress.
To our 5th anniversary, cheers!
This meant Thomas had been having an affair for 5 years, even before our separation when our marriage wasn't yet in disarray. This meant I could claim compensation. Confronted with his lies exposed, Thomas began to tremble. His hands weakened, dropping the stack of papers on the desk. His eyes became vacant, his mouth moving as if searching for words. After 5 minutes, he managed to utter, "What should I do?" I leaned forward as if I had been waiting for those words.
I'll be claiming $30,000 from you as compensation for the affair and the emotional distress you've caused me. And from the other woman, $10,000.
These amounts were the maximum claimable according to standard rates. Thomas panicked at the hefty sum.
I can't pay that. I mean, if I do, it will ruin my life.
His excuses were expected. So, I presented an alternative.
Then let's settle it with compensation in the form of property division. But child support is a separate matter. You'll pay for all of Margaret's expenses, including her high school and future college fees.
Faced with Thomas's refusal, I pressed on.
If you default, I'll go to court for enforcement. Your employer will be notified, and the amount will be deducted from your salary.
Faced with this reality, Thomas reluctantly signed the documents my lawyer had prepared. This marked the end of our long battle. Afterwards, Thomas and I officially divorced, and the financial matters were settled through compensatory property division. Thomas had nearly no savings due to funding his mistress. So in the end, I was only able to protect the savings I had diligently amassed. Naturally, Thomas ended up with nothing from the divorce, a significant blow to him. Concerned about his employer finding out, he has been diligently paying child support every month. Margaret, as if to spite him, studied hard and got accepted into a prestigious private university. I can only imagine the look on Thomas's face when he received the bill for her tuition. His mistress, shortly after paying me the compensation, was arrested and convicted on charges of marriage fraud. It turns out she had other partners besides Thomas, promising marriage to each of them. Thomas really lacked judgment. Thomas, having lost his family, money, and mistress, and as well as his relationships with relatives and friends, would not have ventured into an affair if he had known it would lead to such despair. He lacked such foresight. Now, he leads a lonely life of just working and going home, paying child support every month. Apparently, his colleagues and neighbors knew about his situation, and he faces their cold stares, living in misery. Never underestimate the power of rural gossip network. Thomas learned this the hard way. Meanwhile, I returned home to support my dad, leading a peaceful life. One day, as my daughter was nearing her college graduation, she brought home a young man who seemed very pleasant.
He's my boyfriend.
Dad, moved to tears at the prospect of Margaret's marriage, and I finally felt a sense of relief. Months later, as I helped Margaret with her veil on her wedding day, she said to me with tears in her eyes,
"Mom, thank you for raising me. I promise I'll live a happy life."
Attending my beloved daughter Margaret's wedding filled me with joy. Having parted ways with a terrible husband and seeing Margaret in her wedding dress was more than enough to fill my heart. I decided to cherish every minute and second for the rest of my life.
"You deserve this for standing up to me, you worthless wife,"
Christopher yelled and threw me into the shed. I fell and hit my back against something, groaning in pain. Meanwhile, Christopher shut the door. The shed was engulfed in darkness in an instant. I leaped towards the door and pounded on it fiercely. But it didn't open. It seemed like Christopher did something from the outside. The door felt heavy, and I was overwhelmed by a sense of despair. Was this all my fault? No, I had been aware of Christopher's flamboyant affairs even when we were dating, but I turned a blind eye. Because I loved him. But everyone has their breaking point. Today was mine. When I confronted Christopher about his cheating, he flipped out, leading to this mess. I won't forgive him. No matter what, I will get out of here and make Christopher realize his mistake. But I can't think of a plan. As I'm overwhelmed by my raging emotions, I hear the door open. My name is Mariah. I'm a 44-year-old housewife. I live with my husband Christopher, who is 5 years younger than me. We don't have kids because Christopher didn't want any. I had always dreamt of becoming a mom, but by the time I got married, I was already 35, an age when pregnancy becomes challenging. But now, I think it's probably for the best. Christopher would have too many issues as a dad, and I can't imagine dealing with a child in my current mental state. I met Christopher 12 years ago. I was 32, and he was a youthful 27 years old. We were colleagues, and he often affectionately called me Mariah. I was immediately attracted to Christopher. He was good-looking, cheerful, and friendly. But I couldn't exactly call myself beautiful, and considering our age difference, I didn't think I stood a chance. Then, out of the blue, Christopher confessed his feelings for me. I couldn't believe it, but I was overjoyed and quickly accepted. Our relationship started smoothly. Christopher was understanding about my insecurities regarding my age and appearance.
"Don't worry about that,"
he said. I was happy. The reason Christopher chose me was a mystery, but as long as I believed he loved me, it felt like everything was resolved. But it was a sweet illusion. As our first anniversary approached, Christopher's true nature began to reveal itself. He always used the same excuse, "I forgot my wallet," making me pay for all our date expenses. Up until then, we had been splitting the bill, so the sudden financial burden hurt. More than that, Christopher's repeated excuses for not paying made me see him as insincere. Once, I decided to beat him to it, and said,
"I forgot my wallet,"
before he said so. It was right after we met up. Christopher responded immediately.
"Why don't you go get it? Your place is close, right?"
Close?
"I took the train here, you know that's not happening."
After a nonchalant nod, Christopher turned his back on me.
"Christopher? If you don't have money, we can't go on a date, right? Let's call it a day."
With a wave, he disappeared into the crowd. All I could do was to stand there, dumbfounded. I began to feel uneasy about my relationship with Christopher. Could I ever be happy with him? Even with those doubts, I couldn't leave him. I had a relationship with only one guy before Christopher. The first relationship was during my student days, a brief 6-month affair that ended when he found someone else. As for Christopher, he was quite popular with the women at work. He knew it too, smoothly delegating his tasks to them. He hadn't tried that with me yet, but when would his feelings change? I grew increasingly timid. and even more dependent on Christopher. His smile, his sweet words. I convinced myself they were privileges only for me. But Christopher never understood my desperate clinging. One day at work, I overheard him talking to another male colleague. "I'm with Mariah, but she's the best option for now. She's older, but she pays for our dates, even gifts me watches sometimes. If I were to marry, Mariah seems like a good choice. The other two spend too much, no way." Christopher was seeing 2 other women besides me. I secretly hired a detective to investigate him. I wanted to prove what I heard was a mistake. But the reality was harsh. One of Christopher's girlfriends was a colleague. Another worked for a client company. After much contemplation, I chose to overlook Christopher's promiscuity. He had chosen me as his partner for marriage. Perhaps it was because I catered to Christopher, never complaining about his whims. I believed that once we were married, his bad habits would disappear. But after the wedding, he started staying out blatantly. Upon investigation, it was always with women in their early to mid-30s. Christopher was irresistibly drawn to the financial security these women provide and the inferiority these women felt towards him, leading them to devote themselves completely. Christopher had a girlfriend named Carol. When she realized she'd been deceived, she came to apologize to me first. "I'm so sorry. Christopher told me he was single." "It's okay, we're both victims here," I said calmly. Carol was 35. The age I was when I got married. She had been with Christopher for 2 years. For a woman, that's precious time spent on Christopher. It was even sadder knowing she had seriously considered marrying him. Carol promised to break it off with Christopher. I promised to support her if anything happened. That day, Christopher seemed restless. He had a 2-night, 3-day company trip to Los Angeles starting tomorrow. After he finished packing, Christopher tried to hurry back to his room. I was cleaning up after dinner when I suddenly spoke up. "I talked to Carol." "Who's that?" Christopher tilted his head, feigning ignorance. I spread the documents I received from the detective on the table. "I've known for a while that you have been seeing many women." "Mariah, what are you doing?" Christopher lost it. "Yeah, you're right. So what? I gave those girls a good dream. I deserve something in return." Carol was hurt. I mustn't let myself get angry alongside him. I remained calm and said, "She believed you would marry her." "So, what? You gonna divorce me, Mariah? Then maybe I'd consider." "No, forget it. She's not thoughtful enough, and there are better women out there." "Christopher." I was shocked. I expected him to be upset, but to casually talk about divorce and compare Carol like that. "Anyway, Mariah, you know what happens when you cross me, right?" I was confused. Christopher was the one in the wrong. Yet, he acted as if I had broken some rules. He forcefully grabbed my arm, making me stand up, and led me outside. There it was, the shed. He stopped in front of it, flung open the door, and threw me inside. "You deserve this for standing up to me, you worthless wife." I fell and hit my back against something, groaning in pain. "Christopher, you can't be serious." By the time I turned around, Christopher had already shut the door. I rushed to the door in shock, but it wouldn't open. Christopher must have done something from the outside. "Reflect on this. I'm going out." "Wait, Christopher. Please wait." Being locked up here, I couldn't care less about reflection. I would get thirsty and hungry. If I can't get out of here, I'll wither away. And with Christopher leaving for a company trip tomorrow, what will become of me after 3 days of being left here? I had hoped he might let me out soon. But his footsteps faded away, and the yard fell silent. The shed had no windows. With the door shut, the inside was pitch black. A sense of vulnerability crept up from my feet. Had I really done something so terrible? I knew Christopher could be cold-hearted, but I had never imagined it would go this far. Maybe he doesn't care what happens to me. Perhaps he'll actually leave me locked up here while he's on his trip. Then, it happened.
Mariah.
A soft voice called out. I was startled. The door had opened. There stood Carol, Christopher's ex-girlfriend. She had come to see me. She rang the doorbell but got no response, and noticing noise from the yard, she came to check.
I saw Christopher locking you in here. It's terrible.
It's okay. I chose to be with him, knowing what kind of man he is. This is on me, I said, as if convincing myself. But I'm grateful. I'm glad you were here.
I dated Christopher too, indirectly taking you for granted.
That's not true. I slowly shook my head. You didn't know anything. You truly liked Christopher. That's all, right? Just like me.
Mariah.
Carol looked like she was about to cry, quickly wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I told her, Carol, I need your help. Will you stand up to Christopher with me? Carol looked at me in surprise.
Stand up to Christopher? What are you planning?
I'll explain it now. After I shared the plan, Carol was shocked but nodded in agreement. Christopher had apparently gone to a friend's house. Once we made sure he wasn't home, Carol and I went back inside the house. The plan would begin with Christopher's return. The day I was locked into the shed and the 3 days of the company trip passed. Christopher came out to the yard. She must be okay, right? He mumbled in front of the shed. Realizing the severity of his actions, he was probably feeling guilty. But it was too late. Hey, Mariah. The reflection time's over. You can come out now. Christopher opened the shed door. The moment he did, his expression froze. He rubbed his eyes as if not trusting what he saw, and looked inside the shed again. The result didn't change. Who are you? In front of Christopher, a woman who was not me sat huddled. In his mind, I had been locked in there the whole time. It was impossible for the clothes or hairstyle to change midway. The woman looked up. Christopher's face contorted even more. Carol, what are you doing? Where's Mariah? I'm right here. I emerged from where I was hiding. At the same time, Carol stood up. Surrounded by the two of us, Christopher looked back and forth between me and Carol, flustered. What are you two up to? Relax. We're not going to lock you up. Just calm down and listen to what Carol has to say. Carol's story? Christopher frowned, and Carol seemed to recoil. But she didn't run away. She opened her mouth and blurted it out. Christopher, you've been deceiving me. I'm going to demand compensation. What? Christopher seemed about to explode with anger, but somehow held back. After watching his reaction, I spoke up. Christopher, let's get a divorce. And of course, you'll be paying compensation to me as well. You too. What's with both of you? You are giving women dreams, right? In return, you accepted their devotion. But it's time to come back to reality. Yes, this was our decision. To impose a financial penalty on Christopher. But it wasn't over yet. Christopher's mobile phone rang. Hello? Dad? It's a bad time. I'll call back later. Apologize to Mariah now? Dad, you can't be serious. I've told Polly and the others everything. Christopher's face turned pale. Then, things moved quickly. Maiafael, Polly, rushed over from his family home and fiercely reprimanded his son. I had copied all the documents I received from the detective and sent them to Polly. I've heard it all from Mariah. What kind of person are you? This is the end of our relationship with you. No, Dad. Christopher looked at Polly with tears in his eyes. But Polly's resolve was firm. He ordered Christopher to pay all the compensation to the two women himself. Don't be ridiculous, Dad. Please don't say that. Christopher clung to Polly.
Please, I beg you. I'll change. So, can you at least pay half? Be quiet. You're embarrassing. Mariah, I'm sorry. I never thought my son could be this terrible. I'll make sure he has nothing to do with you anymore. Please don't worry about it, Polly.
Christopher faced a substantial compensation claim from the lawyer hired by me and Carol and was forced to pay a significant amount. Christopher's misdeeds spread quickly among both families. They whispered about disowning him, and eventually, the gossip reached his workplace.
I've been fired from my job.
I see. I remained calm and collected. Christopher, with a trembling voice and downcast eyes.
I can't pay the compensation.
He kept repeating.
How can I pay it without a job? I also have been cut off from relatives. There's nothing I can do.
That's how I felt, Christopher, when you locked me up. Trapped in the dark, unable to go anywhere or do anything. That feeling of being left in the dark with no way out. Now, Christopher was tasting that same despair. There was another fact Christopher didn't know. Carol was pregnant. I was shocked, but even more, I was happy for her.
Congratulations. I know it'll be tough as a single mom, but you can do it.
Thank you. I'll try my best to be a good mom. We didn't want Christopher's sins to burden the child. We wished for the child to grow up strong and straightforward, like Carol. I also thought if I hadn't given up on having a child with Christopher, maybe I'd have had another family member. I asked Carol, "Please let me meet the child when they are born," and saw her off. A child. I intensely wished for one too. Eventually, I decided to adopt once my life was stable. Christopher was gone, so I stayed in the house, and there were part-time jobs available at the nearby grocery store or supermarket. All right, time to gear up. Life felt more vibrant with a purpose. I made friends at work, and the joy of mutual support was new to me, as Christopher had never helped me. Then, here came the long-awaited adoption. The process and preparations were extensive, but I didn't mind. I met her. Not related by blood, but undoubtedly my child. I knew at the moment I saw her. This is the child. Violet recognized me as her mom. Innocently.
Mom.
She called me. Christopher, you wouldn't understand, but the joy of having a child is immense. This is my revenge. Walking my path with my newfound Violet. Not seeking affirmation from Christopher's sweet nothings. To recognize and believe in myself. As a person, as a mom. You always seem so happy these days, said David, my boss. David was 39. Coincidentally the same age as Christopher. But unlike Christopher, David was unpretentious, earnest, and a bit inept. They were entirely different. Perhaps that's why I could open up to a man of Christopher's age.
Mariah, you adapted to work quickly, you're reliable.
It's all thanks to your guidance, David, I said with a laugh. David, for some reason, blushed and looked away. Mariah, do you have plans for your next day off? That day. I'm going to the amusement park with Violet. Oh, right. Wouldn't want to intrude. What about the day after? David, what's up? I noticed that. David's gaze towards me was gentle. It seemed unsettled at some point, as if hiding another emotion. Now I understand. It was probably similar to the feelings I once had for Christopher. David took a deep breath and blurted out, Mariah, would you go out with me? And so, David became my partner. At first, Violet was wary, but she warmed up to him after a few meetings. One day, while enjoying afternoon tea with Violet at home, the doorbell rang. Violet cheerfully replied, "Coming," and ran to the door. Then returned with a pleased look. "It's someone you know, Mom." "Who?" A tall man." Her words alarmed me. There was only one person that came to mind. I told Violet firmly, "Don't come out." "A dangerous person?" "Okay." Violet sensed my tension and looked worriedly at me.
It's okay. Mom won't lose.
I patted Violet's head and went to the door. As expected, it was him.
Who's that kid?
His first words weren't even a greeting. Apparently, it was Christopher.
What do you want?
I asked.
I need money, Mariah.
You can see, right? Indeed, Christopher looked terrible. He hadn't found a steady job since moving from one acquaintance's house to another. Eventually, he had nowhere to stay and ended up on the streets.
I don't have money to lend you.
Hey, Mariah. You've gotten pretty arrogant. Think you've beaten me? Life isn't about winning or losing. But Christopher wouldn't understand that. No pity. Just disgust. Christopher took a step closer.
Mariah, please. This is the last time. I won't show my face again. I'll go to another state and start over. I just need the money for that.
I sighed. His promise to disappear was welcome. But should I help this man?
Mom?
Then, I heard Violet's voice and footsteps. I turned around in a panic.
Don't come here!
I told Violet, but she didn't stop.
Don't trouble Mom. If it's money you need, I'll give it to you.
With that, Violet pressed $1 into Christopher's hand. Christopher stood there, stunned, then collapsed and started crying. A child's innocence. It was the happiness Christopher had once rejected. Violet will start elementary school next year, so we went to look for a school bag. David came along. As the three of us entered the store. What a lovely family. The store manager remarked. Violet beamed proudly, and David and I blushed.
Mom, I like this color.
Let's see. Violet picked an orange bag. It would suit her lively personality well. Let's consider this a gift from me.
Oh, you shouldn't.
I attempted to counter David's impromptu gesture.
I want to give it from me. Then, I'll consider this as a gift from you too.
Violet chimed in cheerfully. David and I looked at each other and nodded in agreement. Sounds good. Yes, let's do that. So we split the cost and bought the new bag together. Being so delighted, Violet didn't let go of the bag all day, even holding it while sleeping. Meanwhile, David approached me with a certain proposal. About the venue.
I don't need a wedding. I didn't have one with my previous husband, and I'm past the age for wedding dresses. That's not true. I want to see you in a wedding dress, Mariah.
David insisted. I recalled Christopher, who begrudged even a wedding ring, let alone wedding expenses. David was different. He proposed with a ring. Now, we're saving for the wedding.
You want to see Mom in a dress, right?
Yes. David had skillfully brought Violet to his side. I could only surrender with a smile. In preparation for the wedding, I embarked on a diet. All the effort paid off when I could wear the dress of my dreams, a moment of immense joy. I couldn't thank David enough for suggesting the wedding. During the ceremony, an emotional David started crying, causing a stir among friends and colleagues. I spent most of the time calming him down, but the ceremony was memorable and fantastic. Afterward, I sold the house I lived in with Christopher. It held memories, but they were all tainted with Christopher's lies. David's apartment was small, but it felt right for our fresh start. The wedding photo took center stage in our new home. David and I smiled awkwardly at the camera. Violet started elementary school. Her bright personality helped her fit in right away. She'd come home and share stories about her friends from school.
I came first in the race. That's amazing. Just like David and me.
Violet blushed, and so did David. I'm profoundly grateful for meeting these two and becoming a family. My past life revolved around pleasing and depending on Christopher. It was my life, yet it felt like it was lived for Christopher. Now, I'm walking a life for myself. Not just for me. But for David and Violet too, our future shines brightly.
Living with a sick person?
That's too depressing, no way.
Just leave that dying Emil alone.
Matthew threw those cold words at me when I expressed my desire to live with my mom, who was in the last stage of breast cancer. I wonder if she couldn't eat good food because she was poor. That's so sad. My Emil, who always disliked my mom, seemed almost pleased upon hearing about my mom's illness. I was shocked. Don't they have a heart? Years later, Emil was diagnosed with a terminal cancer as well. Matthew decided we should live with Emil without asking me, so to get back at him, I chose to leave the house. My name is Alicia, I'm 32. I married Matthew, a former colleague from work, 5 years ago. I wanted to keep working, but Matthew wanted me to focus on housekeeping, so I reluctantly became a housewife. We lived just the two of us, but male Samantha, who lived nearby, often came over. Samantha, who was born and raised in a wealthy family, had a different set of values, but we got along reasonably well. The only concern was the bad relationship between my mom, Natalie, and Samantha. My mom grew up in a fatherless household and was forced to live in poverty. Maybe that's why she took good care of things and didn't indulge in luxuries. However, Samantha was extravagant and bragged about being wealthy more than necessary. The pre-wedding family meeting took place in a hotel near the in-laws' house. The meal went smoothly, but when I went to the restroom, I found Samantha and Mom arguing. "Where did you buy those clothes? They look so poor." Well, I hate the idea of being related to someone who dresses so strangely. Why is Matthew marrying someone from such a weird family? It's not about appearance. Judging people by such things isn't right. Mom wasn't fazed and countered firmly, which seemed to annoy Samantha, who glared at her fiercely. They met again at the wedding but didn't talk at all, and Mom and Samantha haven't met since. Samantha, who lived alone, a 10-minute walk away, was living off the inheritance from her husband, who was a doctor. Perhaps because she had time on her hands living alone, she often visited our house. Before Matthew went to work, he told me to keep the next Sunday free. Why? I was planning to visit Mom on Sunday. Mom's coming over to visit. Can't you handle it alone? If you're my wife, you should at least offer Mom some coffee. But I want to visit my mom sometimes too. We can do that some other time. It's not too far to my parents' home. Just about a 15-minute drive. But because Samantha came over almost every week, I hadn't seen my mom for nearly 3 months. We kept in touch by phone and text, but I missed seeing her in person from time to time. Since Dad passed away, Mom had been working part-time and could only really relax on Sundays. But with Samantha visiting almost every week, it had been hard to find the time to go home. I was just thinking that this week, I should visit my parents' home and talk to Mom. That's when I got a call from an unknown number on my mobile phone. It's XX Hospital. Your mom collapsed at work and was brought here. I panicked at the sudden news. I rushed out of the house and headed to the hospital, where I found my mom lying down. The doctor invited me into the examination room to talk. Your mom has breast cancer. Breast cancer? Can it be cured? Unfortunately, the cancer has spread. It's unlikely to be completely cured. How sad. I couldn't help but tear up at the doctor's words. I never imagined my mom could have cancer. I still haven't been able to repay her for everything. What am I going to do now? I was filled with anxiety. The treatment will be tough and the chances of a complete recovery are slim. We recommend palliative care to make her as comfortable as possible. The doctor's kind words helped me regain some composure, and I returned to the ward. Mom looked much thinner than the last time I saw her. I couldn't help but think that if I had visited Mom sooner, I might have noticed earlier. But it's too late for regrets. I told Mom I wanted to live with her and take care of her at home. She smiled happily at my decision. So, I decided to discuss it with Matthew as soon as I got home. By the time I finished all the hospital procedures, it was already evening. When I got home, Samantha and Matthew were there. Matthew had asked Samantha to prepare dinner because he knew I'd be home late.
How's Natalie?
She has breast cancer. It seems pretty bad, and the treatment doesn't look promising. I told Matthew, fighting back tears. Matthew looked as sad as if it was about his own family and comforted me by stroking my back. Grateful for Matthew's kindness, I told him I wanted to live with my mom. But his response was unexpected. That's a problem. It's depressing to come home to a bedridden sick person. Living with MIL and having to be considerate all the time? Absolutely not. But my time with mom is running short. It's only right to spend it together. I disagree. Can you really take care of Natalie and handle all the housework? Exactly. We need the housework done properly, and you don't even know anything about caregiving. I won't neglect the housework, and I'll learn about caregiving. It's not like she's bedridden right away. Just leave dying Natalie alone. It's such a hassle. Right. It's really silly how desperate you are. They laughed. I could only stare at them in disbelief. Are these people even humans? How can they suggest leaving mom alone when she is about to pass away? Maybe she couldn't afford nutritious food because she was poor. But at least it's not a contagious disease, Samantha said with a laugh. I glared at her, burning with anger. Then, Samantha looked at me and smirked. What's with that look? If you don't like it, just leave. Not sure if Natalie, a part-time worker with a meager salary, and you, a housewife with no income, can survive even a week, though. That's right. I'm supporting you. You should listen to me. I couldn't respond. Matthew paid for all our living expenses. My savings were only from before we got married. There was no way the two of us could live on that. So, I decided to visit my parents' home during the day and take care of mom. It's only a 15-minute drive, not too far to commute. At first, balancing housework and caregiving was manageable, but gradually, as her illness progressed, mom's muscles weakened and she could hardly walk. It was harder than I imagined. Still, I studied caregiving methods diligently and tried my best to repay mom. I took care of her and did the housework without a break, getting more and more tired. Then one day, I saw unfamiliar shoes at my parents' home. When I went to mom's bedroom, I found her sister, Hannah.
What happened? Natalie asked me to come and help Alicia. I'm sorry for the trouble. I'd be okay with staying at a facility, but I thought Alicia might not want that.
Indeed, I wanted her to spend as much time as possible at home. Understanding that, mom had asked Hannah for help. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I want to help too.
From that day, Hannah started coming to the house every other day to help. Having Hannah's help made things much easier. I had more time to rest and felt a little more at ease, but cruelly, the disease kept ravaging mom's body. She caught a severe cold, developed pneumonia, and was admitted to the hospital. A week after her admission, I got a call from the hospital saying mom was critical. When I arrived at the hospital, it was just when mom's heart stopped. As the beeping of the machines echoed, I broke down. The tears didn't stop at the farewell too soon with mom. I was so emotionally shattered that I could hardly manage my daily life. If it weren't for Hannah, I don't think I could have handled the funeral preparations or the inheritance procedures. Matthew and Samantha didn't offer help until the end, nor did they seem to care. Honestly, I was thinking of divorcing Matthew. But my lack of financial independence was a barrier. So, I started working in caregiving. I thought about saving up quickly to get a divorce, but then something happened that made it impossible. I was pregnant. It was a long-awaited child, and both Matthew and Samantha were overjoyed. For me too, it was a much-desired child. Though it was nice to see Matthew and Samantha happy about it. Being pregnant meant I couldn't continue working. A few months later, my son Sean was born safely. Seeing newborn Sean made me feel I had to protect him no matter what. With few childcare centers accepting infants, and the demands of childcare and housework, I reluctantly resigned from my job. I lost my chance to divorce, and about 5 years passed. I started working in caregiving again when Sean began attending preschool. I worked only while Sean was at preschool, juggling housework and childcare at home. One day, Matthew came home early on his day off with a somber look. It was much earlier than his usual return time. Usually, he'd spend his days off golfing with friends or going to the movies, not returning until the evening. But today, it was only 3 p.m.
Dad, you're home early.
Sean greeted him happily, but Matthew didn't respond. We need to have a serious talk, so Sean, please go to your room. After taking Sean to his room, I sat down on the sofa.
What's wrong? You look upset. Actually, I got a call from Mom.
She has a cancer.
What?
The same breast cancer as Natalie. And there's no treatment for Mom either.
I see.
Thinking of Mom, my heart ached. The shock of her passing still hadn't healed, and my heart was still wounded. But my time to grieve was short.
Mom said she wants to spend time with us.
So, we're going to live together.
What?
She's planning to move in the week after next.
Wait. What's wrong? Matthew, you're so against me living with my mom. That was years ago, and that was Alicia's mom. This time it's my mom.
It's different.
How is it different?
I'm absolutely against it. What are you talking about? Can't you, as a wife, take care of your MIL? You married me.
It's only natural to treat my mom the same as your mom.
Matthew countered with an argument that made no sense.
I'm sorry, but I won't be taking care of Samantha. Given how you've spent your days off playing around, never bothering with childcare or housework, you're probably just going to dump the caregiving on me, aren't you?
That's not true.
But Alicia, you work in caregiving, right? So it makes sense for you to do it.
What are you talking about?
I'm not going to take care of Samantha without getting paid.
How heartless can you be? Look, living together is already decided.
I'm renting an electric bed, so make space for it.
With that, Matthew left the house. I was left reeling by Matthew's selfishness. I hadn't forgotten the hurtful things Samantha and Matthew said to me when I wanted to live with my mom. I didn't want to take on the burden of caregiving for such unkind people. I was determined to divorce. After that, Matthew was often late coming home, claiming he was busy with hospital visits and arrangements. He often returned after Sean and I had gone to bed. In Matthew's absence, I began preparing for divorce. The one who helped me with the divorce preparations was Hannah. Hannah had been through a divorce herself, so I consulted her about what should be done. She not only shared her own experiences, but also provided useful information I hadn't even thought of. However, one of my biggest concerns was finding a new home. Even renting an apartment was difficult because I couldn't afford places with high rent. I struggled to find a place that was affordable, suitable for Sean and me, and not too far from my workplace. That's when Hannah offered help.
If you're struggling with rent, I can introduce you to a good property. A friend of mine owns an apartment, and I believe one room is vacant. She's willing to rent it cheaply to have it occupied, and it's not too far from your workplace.
Grateful for Hannah's offer, I immediately asked her to introduce me to the property. It was conveniently located, not far from Sean's preschool and my workplace, so I signed the contract right away. But there was another thing that worried me. It was about Sean. I felt it was unfair to suddenly drag him into the situation and separate him from his dad. I was considering giving up on the divorce if Sean was against it. However, Sean spoke to me with kind words.
Mom, are you okay? Are you in pain? No, I'm not in pain. Just thinking. Would you be sad if you couldn't live with Dad anymore? I'd be a little sad, but I hate seeing you sad more.
I was taken aback by Sean's words and looked into his eyes. Sean continued with a slightly sad face.
Because Mom, you look a little sad when you're with Dad. I prefer it when you smile.
I had heard that children are very observant, but I was surprised to see how much Sean noticed about me. I thought he was still just a child, But he seemed to sense that things weren't going well with Matthew. And still, Sean chose me. With Sean's understanding, I decided to take action. The day came for Samantha to move in. Matthew had left a message saying to make space for the electric bed and other items. He went to the in-laws' house to bring Samantha's belongings. Seizing the moment, I left the divorce papers at the house and took Sean with me to our new apartment. I ignored Matthew's calls as Sean and I sorted through our belongings. The thought of starting a new life filled me with a sense of liberation. Life with just the two of us turned out to be more comfortable than I expected. By cutting costs and living frugally, my salary was sufficient to support us. In fact, I had used my free time after having my child to study caregiving and had obtained a certification, which resulted in a higher salary than before. Since Matthew never contributed to household chores or childcare, the amount of housework I had to do remained the same. Actually, it was easier without having to cook and do laundry for Matthew. However, in the midst of our comfortable life, I unexpectedly ran into Matthew at the supermarket.
"Alicia, what are you doing? You left the house without saying anything."
Matthew approached me, shouting amidst the crowd.
"Stop it. There are so many people here. Damn it. Come home. We'll talk there."
I honestly didn't want to return to that house. To face Samantha again. I didn't want to see her face at all. But to keep my current home a secret, I had no choice but to comply. As soon as I entered the house, Samantha began berating me.
"Where have you been, Alicia?" "It doesn't matter where." "Of course it does. You should come back and take care of Mom."
"No thanks."
"Why not just leave dying people alone?"
"What did you say?
How could you say such a thing? Did you forget already? Isn't that what you told me? Why should I do anything for Samantha when you never lifted a finger?"
Matthew and Samantha's faces turned red with anger and breathed heavily.
"I don't mind if Matthew wants to care for Samantha. I just want a divorce." "Why divorce all of a sudden? You don't even have to do caregiving, just handle the household chores." "Are you tired of even that?"
"No.
It's not the chores I'm tired of. I'm tired of being Matthew's wife. I can't be with someone who cheats on me with a younger woman, saying he's busy with preparations while his mom is sick."
"What do you mean?
What are you talking about?"
Samantha looked puzzled, and Matthew stuttered in denial. His panic made it seem like an admission, but he still tried to lie his way out.
"Actually, when I talked to Hannah about divorcing Matthew because of his tyrannical attitude, she said she saw Matthew entering a young woman's house. So I did a little investigation and sure enough, he's been meeting a woman almost every day."
"A coworker, maybe?"
"I have the photos."
I had received photos of Matthew's infidelity from the investigation. When I showed them, Matthew's face turned pale. Samantha glared at Matthew.
"Matthew, what are you doing when I'm going through such a hard time?" "No, it's not like that. I was thinking this would be the last time we meet. Making memories before I start caring for Mom. I won't meet her again."
"Even if you don't meet her anymore, the fact that you cheated won't change.
If you refuse to divorce, I'm not afraid to go to the court, but you won't stand a chance of winning.
So, please sign the divorce papers quickly.
And from now on, any discussions about the divorce should go through my lawyer."
Matthew looked frustrated and then, as if he had an idea, he smirked maliciously.
"You're working in caregiving now, right?"
"Yes."
"I bet you're not earning much. With your salary, you must be living a poor life in a cheap apartment."
He probably thought he could intimidate me by highlighting my lack of financial resources. But I was no longer the person I used to be.
"Thankfully, I got a good deal on a cheap apartment and am living a slightly better life. Of course, I need to be frugal, but I'm not struggling so much that Sean has to go without. I won't be controlled by you forever."
"Controlled?" "Yes."
"You wanted to keep me from earning money by dumping all the housework on me, making me think I couldn't live without you.
But I can live without you." When I spoke my mind, Matthew's face twisted in frustration.
"Fine, I'll divorce you. But don't come crying when you run out of money. Life will only get tougher when Sean starts advancing in school. Just wait, you'll suffer.
Matthew signed the divorce papers on the spot. I took them and stood up. Thank you. Now we're strangers. Good luck with Samantha's care.
Oh, and about the compensation from the divorce trial, my lawyer will handle it.
With those words, I left the house. It was half a year later. Not at the supermarket where I had previously met Matthew, but at a different one. I saw Matthew standing at the entrance. And when he saw me, he hurriedly approached.
I'm glad to find you. If you live around here, I thought you'd come here for sure.
What do you want? We're strangers now, so don't talk to me.
Wait. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Please come back.
It seemed Matthew didn't know my apartment or workplace and had been waiting for me at local supermarkets, hoping to run into me. And then, Matthew fervently apologized. What now?
I was wrong. Mom can't even go to the toilet by herself anymore, and I can't manage caregiving after work. It's too much. I'm exhausted, making mistakes at work. I can't handle it all on my own.
Matthew was likely struggling with housekeeping. He was wearing a dirty shirt. And his hair was unkempt and unbearable to look at.
So you realized how hard caregiving is. I really felt it. So, can you come back and help?
No.
But why?
It's too late for regrets now. It's all because of what you did, Matthew. Don't come near me again. If you follow me, I'll report it to the police.
Alicia, don't say that. Please.
Make sure you pay the child support and compensation from the divorce trial. Matthew was in tears. The same Matthew who always looked down on me. His pathetic state was just astonishing. The heartless words about my mom, the selfish behavior of constantly playing around without caring for the family, and to top it off, the betrayal of cheating, this was the result. There was no other way to put it but as a consequence of his own actions. Afterward, Matthew apparently pressured his affair partner into marriage, but was, of course, rejected. It seemed she reported him to their superiors, leading to a sexual harassment case, and he was transferred to another department. This news came from former colleagues at the company where we both worked before getting married. Having several acquaintances there, I naturally received updates. Balancing caregiving and work became too much for him, his performance dropped, and with the transfer, his salary significantly decreased. With the reduced income and obligations to pay the child support and compensation from the divorce, he's apparently in a situation where he can't afford a helper or caregiving services. He's desperately trying to provide care, but he's at his limit both mentally and physically, unable to focus at work, making frequent mistakes, and spiraling down. A former colleague mentioned that if the mistakes continue, he might even be fired. It's unfortunate, but it's no longer my concern. I'm living a peaceful life in the apartment Hannah introduced to me. Balancing housework and my job is challenging, but with Sean and Hannah's support, we're managing. It's a pity I couldn't show Sean to Mom, but I like to think she's watching over us as I do my best for Sean's sake.